So, welcome back to another wonderful land and wonderful evening in the Marshmallow Land. Um, the COVID thing continues to unwind. Um, does look like we're on the downhill side right now. A lot of the companies out there in the workforce have figured out that going to stage six or going to a back to work type flow really doesn't make much sense till September because childcare doesn't exist and everybody's going to be away on vacation. And so, really, what it looks like is the country's going to go back to work in September. Interesting. Um, we're we're still not hearing anything that would indicate that there's a variant that has jumped the uh, current vaccines. That's good news. So the vaccinations that are going on are in fact uh, plowing a trench of safety across the country and certainly are going to play a large role in reducing the death toll. And it won't, in my mind, lead to the eradication of the disease. I think this is something that's going to be around for a while and flare up from time to time. And there's going to be an element of this that we have to live with. Um, Vaccinations for um, COVID are probably going to be a part of life going forward. Um, I read that the current confidence level in the length of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines is about 6 months. That will get longer as statistics, as we get to the 6 month out from where we are. We've never seen beyond 6 months, so at this point we don't have any data. It might work fine for a year, but there just isn't a good enough body of statistical information to give us that picture. Um, all of that plays into how Northwest Nuclear unfolds the uh, back to lab environment. We're going to be tracking uh, probably about the same. We're going to be looking at September as a tentative date at this point, unless there's, again, some kind of a change. If there was a significant upsurge in one of the variants, or we started losing ground substantially, of course, all bets are off. But right now, it looks like the September enrollment for the 22 school year is the most likely time that we're going to be able to return to a full-on laboratory environment. My apologies to my apologies to the seniors at that point. um, we may do some shuffling if there are some seniors who want to come in over the summer this year. We may shift things and give preference to seniors who want to work or do some research, explore over the summer, simply because they're going to be going out when September comes, off to college and doing whatever they're going to do with the rest of their lives. A lot of you, I know, were not present for the intelligent design class we had last week. So there's going to be a makeup. We're going to put that out on the web. We've decided there's a couple of portions of it that had audio problems. And so we're going to remake those before we stick them out there so that you can actually understand what's being said. Um, and that should happen the next couple of weeks, but we're going to continue on tonight with the Women in Science. We've got a couple of people presenting. Diego, if you haven't figured out that you're presenting, you're actually first up tonight. Are you ready?
I mean, as ready as I'll ever be.
Oh, okay. Hang on just a second.
We're recording.
Now we are. Now the way we're going to do this, do you do you know how to present from your desktop?
You mean like sharing my screen?
Yeah, share your screen and do a full presentation because I can pop your screen up here in the window
Mm-hmm.
and let's just try that. Love to try
So I can
things.
share my screen, but with PowerPoint being kind of weird, it will always put it on my other monitor. So I would have to show it within like the slide deck view.
Oh, okay. Well, let's go with what we got then. You just say next, and I'll click the slide. Okay.
Okay. All right. Also, I will ask, bear with me. I am really bad when it comes to presentations.
Okay. Well, we'll give it a spin. Let's.
So this is Grace Murray Hopper, a pioneer when it came to programming, specifically computer programming. Next, please. Grace Hopper was initially born in New York City in December 9th, 1906, and for a child at age 7, learned how to disassemble an alarm clock, which is quite impressive. Entered her way into Vassar College. She was initially going to do it at age 16, but was initially denied and was reaccepted. Well, not reaccepted, but accepted into Vassar College at age 17, where then she proceeded to graduate with a bachelor's in mathematics and physics and serve as an assistant teacher to pay her way through Yale to earn her PhD in mathematics. Next, please. Professional life. So she became a professional, like a full-time teacher during 1931 at Vassar, was then promoted to an associate professor in 1941, and accepted to join the military at age 34. Well, not accepted, but attempted, sorry. But was initially denied and joined and was accepted into the WAVES program in 1943, which stood for Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service, where it was trying to help get women more into the front lines besides of the normal nursing and office jobs, if that makes any sense. Was assigned to work on the Mark I series of electromagnetic computers, which was the first set of computers assigned and was planning to be used for military use. And created the catchphrase of debugging. I tried to do some research on this, and I have not seen many other people who originated with the word debugging, which originally came from when Grace Hopper was initially working on the Mark I series, and it seemed to have a problem with it keep short circuiting. And it was discovered that there was a moth in the system. And after removing of the moth, she coined it down and wrote it as debugging the computer. Next, please. Grace Hopper created the first ever compiler, which created text into binary code, which helped with computers. Promoted the language of COBOL, which is Common Business Oriented Language, and was one of the first main languages accepted. She was recalled from the active service at age 60, but returned literally the next year for another 20 years, where then she retired at age 79, which was the oldest for her time. On awards, she received the National Medal of Technology in 1991. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2016, a full-on conference in her honor dedicated to women getting into computer science, known as the Grace Hopper Convention, I think hosted every year. It should have been hosted about a couple months ago if it wasn't for COVID. And in 1996, the Navy commissioned a destroyer known as the USS Hopper, which helped with computer-oriented anti-air. Next, please. Takeaways. Grace Hopper was a pioneer in computer science and programming. She was the one who popularized and aided military use of computers, now of the Mark I computer, and now computers in general in the first place, and created the phrase for debugging. And I didn't write this down, but the biggest thing is computer, due to her constant promotion of the COBOL language, computer programming like Java, Python, and C Sharp wouldn't be at its current monolith as it is today if it wasn't for Grace Hopper. Next, please. We're excited. Thank you all for watching.
Yeah. Um, boy. Some shadows of my past. I entered the computer world in 1968. In 1972, I went to the U.S. Army and attended the first 36-week program in computer repair that had ever been put together by the U.S. military. And they didn't have a curriculum to do that, but they realized that they needed one because they were deploying computers to Vietnam and to Europe. And so they had to have people that were capable of fixing them. So they decided the best way for uh, technicians to reach a level of competence was to um, have us build one. So we built a computer, and we're talking at the circuit board level with the chips, building our own ALU shift registers, memory address registers. We learned all of the data flow of the processor unit bit by bit, and then we would actually um, key that data into the paper tape and punch systems um, with switches and step switches. We would actually set up the binary patterns for each word and then advance the memory location and set up the next word and advance the memory location. You could spend hours in front of the switch panel entering a program or a diagnostic or a bootstrap. And bootstraps were necessary to get a routine going so that you could then upload a paper tape which had a larger program which then could reach out to the disk and pull in the actual operating system. So there were several different layers of how computers got loaded. Um, an amazing time. And of course now I'm working with Microsoft at extreme levels of technology, uh, IT manager for Surface Worldwide, and we are seeing an incredible evolution of technology in the cloud with parallel processing and high scale HPC and array processing. Nothing that even remotely resembles what we originally started out with. It's it's been a culture shock to go from vacuum tube based computers in 1968 all the way up to monolithic multi-layer boards with surface mount technology today. Just a real amazing period. And obviously she was the forerunner of all that. Um, there were those of us who came along close behind and leveraged what she had done. Very cool story. Thank you, Diego. Good job. Pardon me while I change
Thank you, sir.
points. Paul, are you on there tonight? Hello, Paul Kwan. Okay, we are short a presenter. So David will be moving directly to your presentation next. Does everybody see our new rocket ship chairs? Aren't they cool? I know you folks out on the internet haven't seen them yet, but you will.
All right, if you'll recall, we started in celebration of National Women's Month, Women's History Month. We said we would present on famous women scientists. And I gave a list of 38.
You're doing good. We got you.
I can't hear the suddenly I've got really loud static. Everything was
Okay,
clear before.
David. David, just go ahead and talk.
Okay. Anyway, so I gave you a list of 38 famous women scientists. Y'all chose which ones you wanted to do. And I decided, well, the other ones are still worth hearing about. So tonight I'm going to do very, very short presentations on each of the women that were not chosen. And then afterwards, we'll have a short quiz over all of them. No, I'm just kidding about the quiz. But you might find somebody who's interesting that I'm only going to talk about very, very briefly. So you might want to jot down the name and look it up later, or just remember it. So, some famous women scientists. These are in alphabetical order, so not by importance or win or anything else. Our first one was Augusta Alice Ball. She lived from 1892 to 1916. She was the first female, excuse me, and the first African American chemistry professor at the University of Hawaii. She was a chemist who developed an injectable form of Chuamagra oil, the first effective treatment for leprosy, a really horrible disease, also called Hansen's disease. It caused parts of the body to die and fall off, and people were actually put on a separate island as part of Hawaii, and kept apart from other people because they didn't know what caused it, whether it was communicable or whatever. Very disfiguring disease and stigmatizing. She came up with the first treatment. She unfortunately died at age 24, just a year after she'd come up with that. Well, there was another chemist at the university who stole her research and claimed that he did it. And she wasn't there in order to deny it. Finally, in 1922, that person admitted that she had done it and published a paper giving her credit for it. And she was the creator of the Ball method for the treatment of leprosy. Our second person is Jocelyn Bell Burnell. She was an astrophysicist, and she was given the honorarium because of her work of being a dame. So she was Dame Susan Jocelyn Bell Burnell. She was born in 1943 in Belfast, North Ireland. In 1967, she was investigating quasars with a radio telescope. And she discovered, while she was looking at quasars, she found one that wasn't like a quasar. She found a pulsar, what it named eventually. And it was very rapidly spinning, and it was a neutron star. It spun around 1,000 times a minute. Sorry, per second. She received a Nobel Prize for that discovery, which was also, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. A Nobel Prize for that discovery was awarded to two of her professors. It wasn't given to her because she was only a student when she made this very important discovery. Again, academic discrimination, not the first time. Next person is Annie Jump Cannon. Lived from 1863 to 1941, and she was known as the census taker of the sky, and you'll see why in a moment. She was an American astronomer, first woman to receive a Doctor of Astronomy degree at Greenwich University. She developed what's called the Harvard Spectral Classification System. It ordered stars, put them in order by their brightness and color, which really meant she was ordering them by their temperature. The temperature was what determined how bright they were and what color they were. And she created a mnemonic device, which was, "Oh, be a fine girl, kiss me." OBAFGKM, that's the brightnesses of the different stars. She, through her observations, cataloged around 350,000 stars. A lot of observations, amazing amount of work. And she did all of that using her system. So you can see why she was called the census taker of the sky. She took the census for the stars. Our next person is Rachel Carson. Rachel Louise Carson lived from 1907 to 1964. She was an American marine biologist, not known as much for that as for being an author and a conservationist. In 1962, she published a very famous book called Silent Spring about the use of synthetic pesticides. That sparked the national environmental movement and ended up leading to the development of the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom posthumously, meaning after she died. My personal opinions, the EPA is a great organization, has done great things. The environmental movement was very important and got things started in the right direction. Rachel Carson I don't like. She published a lot of things that weren't true in her book, and she was known for dramatizing and carrying things a bit too far. Again, my personal opinion. Skip one. And next, one of my favorites, Jennifer Doudna. She's an American biochemist who was born in 1964. She developed the biochemical technique that we call CRISPR-Cas9. It was a method of very specifically editing the genome, changing a very particular part. And that has been said to be one of the most significant discoveries ever in biology. She ended up receiving the 2020 Nobel Prize in Chemistry. She's received many other awards and honors. She is currently researching another technique, the specific editing of RNA. The importance of that is you're not changing the DNA, you're changing the RNA that's produced from the DNA. So you're not changing the inheritance, you're not affecting further generations. And that makes it a much safer technique. And she's working on that technique at the Salk Institute in San Diego, California. If I had my life to live over again, I think I'd like to be there. Wally Funk. She holds a number of firsts for female pilots. She was born in 1939 in Las Vegas, New Mexico. She was the first female air safety investigator for the National Transportation Safety Board. She was the very first female civilian flight instructor at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And she was the first Federal Aviation Agency inspector, the people who go out to plane crashes and figure out what caused the crash. Very important person. And I think it was last year that we had a neighbor here who was a retired inspector come and talk to the students. She also was one of the members of the Mercury 13, a group of 13 women who were trained as astronauts until their program got canceled. Gender discrimination. In their training, she outperformed many of the male astronauts, such as a man who put the first step on the moon. But she never got to go into space. A definite shame. Next is Helen Gwynne Vaughan, who lived from 1879 to 1967. She was a mycologist and British soldier. She, through her work, also received the honorarium of being a dame. So she was Dame Helen Gwynne Vaughan. She had a doctorate in botany, but she specialized in mycology, studying the genetics of fungi. She served in both world wars in the British military. She became the commandant of the Women's Royal Air Force, highest ranking woman in that. She was also involved in a lot of politics. She co-founded the University of London Suffrage Society and was very involved in equal rights for women and the vote for women. Next is Caroline Herschel, who lived from 1750 to 1848 in Germany. She was an astronomer. She was the first woman who received a salary as a scientist, first one ever. She was also the first woman to ever hold a government position in England. Her brother was a very famous astronomer named William Herschel, and she was an astronomer also. She discovered a number of comets, and one of them was named after her. She also cataloged the 2,500 nebulae that her brother discovered. He would discover the nebulae and then try to write down all the characteristics of that, and found it was too much for him. So he ended up having her as his assistant, and she did all the cataloging on all of these nebulae that he discovered. Quite a feat. For doing that, the King of Prussia, on her 96th birthday, gave her the Gold Medal of Science. Next, we have Dorothy Hodgkin. From 1910 to 1994, she was a British biochemist. Dorothy Crowfoot Hodgkin received the 1964 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for her pioneering work with X-ray crystallography. She was able to determine the structures of a variety of chemicals, such as the steroid cholesterol iodide, vitamin B12, and insulin. She also was able to confirm the predicted structure of penicillin. She received many awards and honors, but even though she was still banned from entering the United States due to her political views and her husband's association with the Communist Party. She is not believed to have been a communist, but she did hold several views that were close to his. Next, we have Shirley Ann Jackson. She was born in 1946, lived in Washington, D.C. She was the second African American to receive a doctorate in physics in the whole United States. She was the first one to receive a doctorate in physics at MIT. She is currently the president of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And she's actually a very controversial president there. In 2015, Time magazine reported she was the highest paid college president, and she was receiving $7.1 million that year. The controversy has been the fact she is paid a lot and what she has done with that, even though much of her money has gone to charitable venues. She was chairman of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission under President Clinton. She was chair of the President's Intelligence Advisory Board under President Obama. Very significant lady. Next, we have Mae Jemison, who was born in 1956 in Decatur, Alabama. She was the first black woman in space. She was the mission specialist on the Space Shuttle Endeavour. I forgot to mention, back when we were talking about the Mercury 13 and those women, although they didn't get to go in space, the Russians were very worried about the fact that they were going to beat the United States at putting a woman in space. And so they very hurriedly rushed a woman in the space program. So it did have an effect, even though Mercury 13 was canceled. Mae Johnson had both a degree in chemical engineering and she was a physician. She'd gone to medical school. She also wrote several children's books, and she is the only astronaut who has appeared in an episode of Star Trek. She was actually on Star Trek Generation. She is currently the principal investigator for the 100-year Starship project, which is a very controversial project, but it is funded by NASA and DARPA, and its purpose is to prepare for interstellar travel. And some people feel that that's not a good thing to try to do when money is needed for other projects. But they're working on developing the administrative and bookkeeping methods and all, and then the actual way of doing it to develop travel between stars. You just need to find the right black hole. Next is Mary the Jewess, also called Mary the Prophetess. My research said that she lived sometime between the 1st and 3rd centuries. In my mind, that would mean she lived in the 2nd century. But apparently, to the other authors, it means she was either 1st, 2nd, or 3rd century. She was the first alchemical writer, although we don't have any of her works today. Nothing has survived. But she was written about by other people, so we know of her. She's considered to be the first alchemist in the Western world. And although alchemists were trying to transmute lead into gold, they also did a lot of other things, and they created a lot of what we started to know as chemists. So they were the forerunners of modern chemistry. She invented some early pieces of chemical equipment, including the bain-marie, an early double boiler, so that you could heat something up, and depending on the liquid you were using, the temperature of what you're heating could not reach above the boiling point of that liquid. She also invented something called the keratokis, which basically created a vacuum so that reactions ended up being hermetically sealed. And from that we get the whole idea of hermetically sealing things. Next is Sophia Louisa Jex Blake, lived from 1840 to 1912 in the United Kingdom. She was the leader of the Edinburgh Seven, 7 women who decided they wanted to study medicine and become doctors. They were the first women to study medicine in the United Kingdom. After completing their studies at the university, facing a ton of discrimination and heckling and other things, even a riot because of them from the males that she worked with. After completing the studies, all 7 women had their degrees withdrawn from them by the British courts. They said that the women should never have been enrolled. So, all 7 women went to Europe to get their degrees, and they all became doctors. Dr. Jex Blake continued to fight for women's rights. She got them to change the laws to allow women in medical schools in the United Kingdom, and she opened 2 medical schools specifically for women. Next we have Katherine Johnson, another one I like. Lived from 1918 to 2020. She just died last year. Watch the movie Hidden Figures. It's amazing. And it's her story, as well as 2 other black women she was with. She was one of the first African American women to work for NASA. Her ability to calculate complex orbital mechanics were critical to the Project Mercury and the Project Apollo space missions. She manually calculated launch windows, trajectories, and emergency return paths. She also pioneered the use of computers to do those calculations at NASA. She received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Obama. In 2019, she received the Congressional Gold Medal. She was quite a lady. And she faced terrible discrimination against her because she was a woman. Fortunately, there was a man who backed her up and was very helpful. Rita Levi-Montalcini lived from 1909 to 2012 in Italy. She had a difficult start in life because she was a Jew and she was living in fascist Italy. However, she overcame that. She became a neuroembryologist. She founded and served as president of the European Brain Research Institute in 2002. She received the 1986 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine with her colleague, Stanley Cohen, from their discovery of nerve growth factor, NGF. And I personally did some research with NGF and found that it's a very powerful growth factor that can make nerve cells grow very, very quickly. Has been considered one of the hopes of helping to repair nerve damage in spinal cord injuries. She was the first Nobel Prize recipient to reach the age of 100. And one of the important things about the Nobel Prize is to live a long time, because it's never given posthumously. If you die, you don't get it. So it's important to live long. She also had a career as a politician. She was made a senator for life in Italy. Yeah. Next, I'm not sure of the pronunciation, even though I studied German. Emmy Noether lived from 1882 to 1935 in Germany. Emmy Noether was recognized by Albert Einstein and many others as the most important woman in the history of mathematics. She worked in abstract algebra. She developed theories in rings, fields, and algebras. Most importantly, she developed what came to be called Noether's theorem, a fundamental theorem that explains the connection between symmetry and conservation laws. In 1933, she fled to the United States when Germany started persecuting Jews. Another great instance of how Germany helped America to defeat Germany in World War II by discriminating against all of their top scientists and having them come to the United States and elsewhere. Christiane Muslin-Wallard. She also was born in Germany in 1942, and she received the Nobel Prize in Medicine and Physiology in 1995 with 2 other people for the research that they did on genetic control of embryonic development. Her study of embryo development related to mutated genes, and it laid the groundwork for further discoveries of things such as homologs, homeobox genes, and transcription factors, and many other things. She was the director of the Max Planck Institute for Developmental Biology, which is the top ones in the world. Next is Beatrice Schilling. She was a bit different. Lived from 1909 to 1990 in the United Kingdom. She was an aeronautical engineer, but she was also an amateur racing driver. During World War II, there were two British planes, the Hurricane and the Spitfire, that had a very big problem. When they had fighting combat maneuvers against the Germans, if they experienced negative G-forces, such as in a steep dive, then the fuel would be fed to the carburetor too fast, and it would flood the carburetor and drop the power of the plane or even kill the engine, which makes for very bad outcomes when you're having a dogfight. So the Germans, the English were really doing badly in aerial combat. But she designed and made a device, a small orifice that restricted fuel flow to the carburetor in the Rolls-Royce engines that those planes had. And that enabled the British to be more successful in their aerial combats. During World War II, she also raced motorcycles, and then afterwards she got into racing cars. Donna Strickland, a Canadian born in 1959. She was an optical physicist and a pioneer in the field of pulsed lasers. She received the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2018, together with her advisor for her doctorate, Gerard Moreau. Their work was the practical implementation of chirped pulse amplification. Their process allowed lasers to function above the gigawatt per square centimeter limit without destroying the laser. The feedback used to destroy them. So they ended up being able to build optical table terawatt to even petawatt lasers. Very, very powerful. Next we have Janet Taylor from 1804 to 1870. She was born in England. She was an early expert in astronomy and navigation. She published several books on navigation for mariners. She ended up developing what's called the mariner's calculator to help them figure out latitude. Figuring out latitude is extremely important when you're on a ship at sea and you don't have any landmarks to go by. And it's easy to get lost and end up in the wrong place. She created a rule for calculating latitudes from altitudes. And she derived the formula to reduce the lunar distances in calculations. And that was called ingenious by the experts. She founded an academy for teaching astronomy and navigation. She also started a factory to develop, produce, and repair nautical instruments. And she received many, many awards for the work that she did. Last, we have Valentina Tereshkova. She was born in Russia in 1937. She was the very first and youngest woman in space on a solo mission. She was on the Vostok 6, which launched on June 16th in 1963. Her mission lasted just short by minutes of 3 days, and she orbited the Earth 48 times. And she was put in there at the very last minute to beat those Americans in putting a woman into space, and they succeeded. At age 60, she was forced to retire. They required that in the Russian military at that time. And at that time, she was made an honorary major general in the Russian Air Force. She was involved in politics also. She was elected to the State Duma, the lower house of the Russian legislature, for her local area. She ran several times for higher positions, but she didn't succeed in attaining those. Almost all of my information is basically copied from Wikipedia because this was just put together as short biographies of these leading ladies. So, thank you. It's on.
Hello, check 1, 2. Okay, everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So what we got going on tonight is a little bit of finishing some work that we did, and then a little bit of a test drive. We need to foil some nose cones. So we have these wonderful nose cones for our COVID incinerator. And this is actually a reducer. Takes a 6-inch pipe down to a 4-inch pipe. Very necessary part of our operation. And we know from experience, you see these beautiful pristine white pipes. If you expose them to UVC for even 15 minutes, they look like this, burnt to a crisp. So it's necessary to cover the inside of these because in a matter of a few days, the intense radiation of the machine that we built will no doubt discolor and begin to cause the plastics to outgas. That's a bad thing because that outgassing and decomposition of the material will get into the airflow, and we don't want that. So it's necessary for us to just simply cover the inside. Now, in here, to kind of show you, you can see that there's a ridge all the way around, and that ridge is about 2.5 inches, 3 inches inside of the lip of this. We don't want to get foil on this because that's where it intersects with the other portion of it, and it completely mates with it in such a way that we don't have to worry about that part being exposed to the light. It's beyond that ridge and up to the place where it turns the corner in the 4-inch tube. So just this bevel in here is what we need to get covered. So there's some tricky geometry here, some fancy stuff that we're going to have to do with this foil tape. In fact, we're going to have to be really creative. And guess who's going to be creative? You are. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this foil down. I'm going to get a couple of pairs of scissors, and I want you folks to come up here and attack these two and foil the distance between the 4-inch section and the 6-inch section without foiling the portion that mates with either a 4-inch pipe or the 6-inch pipe, just the place in between. And once we get both of those done, We have the blower set up. We're going to go out in the garage. We're going to fire this thing up at 1,000 feet per minute and take a look at the airflow.
Will the reflected radiation go past the end of that and affect the next piece of tubing?
Actually, most of it will be redirected back into the oven just by the angle and nature of the 6 to 4 inch reduction. The angles will bounce it back.
Okay.
Some of it will go forward, but it's not enough for us to worry about. We will monitor it because it is a new device, but that's why you build prototypes is to run them for extended periods of time, and then take them apart, analyze the results, and figure out where you need to make material adjustments. So I would like Caitlin and Annette to come up here and take a shot at this. And you guys are going to do one, and then I'll have Christina and Evan come up and do the other one. And we'll see who winds up with the least number of wrinkles. That's the challenge. So here's the scissors. And Annette and Caitlin, why don't you come on up and I'll connect you up to the hoses here. And we're going to get right down to it. This is R&D at the extreme level. Okay, so you've got a pair of scissors and some tape. I'll go get another pair of scissors. And you folks can get started.
Okay.
All right.
How should we do it?
We have to do this whole area here, right? Should we just take small pieces of tape and... Or should we do it...
Do you want to like cut strips like this and then you could hold down one side?
Yeah, we can do that.
Now you can cut it into really small strips, or you can cut it into patches or circles. In other words, use your ingenuity. Figure out how you want to attack this thing. Don't go up. You got to go down below the seam.
Yeah, it's probably better to do.
You're only going in the beveled portion. This is actually a really good exercise because it forces you within a limited range of physical and mechanical opportunities to do some innovation and be creative and figure out what's
I think we do
the
have
best
to cut
approach.
it right here.
Yeah, we're going to have to cut the portion off that went,
Onto here.
yeah. So here, Annette,
Yeah.
so smooth it nice and tight all the way down to the junction, and then just slice it off there. Perfect. You're off and running. feel free to dolly in and look right down into the hole if you.
Yeah.
Here, let me take it right in and go. And zoom.
Sure.
Good enough of a.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You can have tape overlapping as much as you want, but we are trying to avoid wrinkles. Can't read that. Unkid. Okay. We're also going to award a zero Band-Aid award for the person who succeeds not slicing themselves to pieces. Caitlin, you have a gift.
Do you want
She
it?
just,
I'm really bad at taking the tape off.
well, she has very small hands. She'll make a fantastic orthopedic surgeon. No joke.
Do you wanna, like,
That is one of
use
the key ingredients in
all
Should I
becoming
cut
a
it before?
really
Side.
successful orthopedic surgeon is small hands.
Should I cut it
If you
before?
if you have large hands, you can't do it.
The ones we're doing are kind of wrinkly.
Yeah.
So do you want to like
Cover
try
it?
to? I'll
I,
hold
I
down
wouldn't
one
I would
side.
I would just keep going around because you got quite a bit of distance to cover, and then come back and patch the things after you've got one layer down.
My brother-in-law, who is an orthopedic surgeon, said that if you're working on knees and hips, it helps to be very strong.
Ah, if you stand back in your mind's eye and you look at the last couple of months of developing this device and what prototyping involves and what innovating involves. Taking materials off of Amazon and off of eBay and wherever you can find things and trying to find a way to get a working model going so that once you have it, you can actually test it and come up with some parameters in a performance envelope that gives you the practicality of your technology. And it's vital that in a research and development environment you get as quickly to that performance envelope as you can, because that's what determines the go forward for manufacturing. If there's opportunity to go ahead and make 10,000 of these, then you're going to have to be able to demonstrate that in the prototype.
I can try to do that, but could you try to peel this off?
Yeah, sure.
The extra.
Did you already cut it?
Okay, maybe we can do that later.
Yeah, that's it.
I would just skip that and move on to what you're doing. We can actually, I have other tools that we can come back and clean that up with. Okay, Evan and Christina, want to come up here and we'll get you plugged in and you can use the other pair of scissors now that we've kind of figured out. Christina, why don't you come around here? Okay.
Okay, yeah, I'm thinking similar, the same direction that they're doing, but we might want to do a little bit of overlap on the smaller radius side so that, like,
Okay.
when we, yeah. Oh.
Evan,
Mm-hmm.
Caitlin needs the tape.
So, so you said overlap right here?
Yeah,
or...
and then we'll have to,
Okay, we
oh,
just cut it.
overlap, like, when we put the next one down, we'll put it, like, because if we keep putting them side by side, eventually we're going to be off, because the radius on this side is smaller than this one, right?
Should we keep this right here, or do you want to cut this?
We'll have to cut that, yeah. They have the exact
Yeah.
amount. Oh, yeah.
I'll get you an exacto.
Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
thank you.
Can you pass that knife? Thank you.
Okay, this is got a brand new blade in it.
Mm-hmm. You go first.
take this tape out.
Okay, let me just pull up your creation so far and show it to the camera. And there you see, it's 99% done. The interior of the areas where the pipe connects are clean and basically, and that's what we're looking for. One little section in there that we're going to have to pull off, but that's about it. Looks really good. Can I show them yours for just a sec here? So again, we see we're about 99% complete. Doing a little bit of patching here. We got more cleanup to do, but
So you want to cut it like here, right?
yeah, you're going to do a nice clean cut all the way around. I get it cut all the way around, Evan, before you start trying to pull it off. That way you can pull it all out as one great big piece. Okay, let me see what we got here. All right. we've got I'd say that one's ready to go. Okay. Evan and Christina, I think, are just in cleanup, right? Okay, so we're just minutes from being done. Now, Ankit and Christina, or Caitlin, excuse me, if you guys could just do a quick check and see that you still have 10 fingers. Yeah, dude, oh, good. All right, that's nice. Okay, so Caitlin and Ankit, if you guys would come with me out to the garage, I'm going to show you the next part of this. We got about 15 minutes left, and we're going to start setting up to do the blow. Okay, you got your hose? Let's move quickly. If you guys could plug into those two down there.
Can you plug mine in too?
Yeah. Oh, what? Nothing work? Yeah, no problem.
Okay. Now I'm going to go switch cameras, so I'll be right back, and then we'll actually start working. Okay, we're on the shop now. Okay, the first thing we're going to do helps if you turn on the air, Carl. Okay, now this is our blower. We've got a high amperage blower here. Now is that working? Yeah, you sure? Okay, yeah, all right. Okay, so we got plenty of air. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to hand this. You're going to hold one end, You're going to hold the other end, okay? Okay, I got it. We're going to take it and unkit. I'm going to pass it right through to you. We're going to go right to the ballast and set it down. Okay? So this connects up that portion. Now we're going to have this. Could do it either way. I think we'll drive it from that end. So we'll put the motor down here. We'll put this into a device that will allow us to monitor the amount of power that it's drawing. We'll take your piece. Now there's a hammer over there. Can you reach that, Christina? Caitlin, I'm sorry. Got it? All right. Put this on here. Looks like we're going up. So we're going to actually, yeah, about there. Now I'll bring this alongside. Okay, and you have the other piece, right? Okay. Okay. Now if you'll all stand by for a second, I've got a minor camera adjustment to make. Okay. Behind you. No. Oh, there. Okay, this is going to be the power for our incinerator. And we have the power for our machine. Okay, now we're ready to do a power on test.
What is it that we're measuring here?
Couple things, and I'll go through them one at a time.
Okay.
Okay? So I'm turning on the bulbs. Caitlin, would you look in the end and tell me if all 10 bulbs are lit?
Yeah, they're all lit.
Okay, all 10 bulbs are lit. Okay, the first thing that I'm going to be using here is something called an anemometer, and we're going to measure the wind speed. Okay, the wind speed coming out of the end of this is 56 miles an hour.
What
We
would
are
that-
currently consuming 1,500 watts in the blower alone.
$56 miles an hour. Is that like a small hurricane?
Yeah, I want all of you to go up and stick your hand in front of that thing and get a sense of how hard that's pushing on the end of that. David, you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
Okay. One moment, please. Christina, would you be our recorder? We have 56 miles an hour. We're currently drawing 1,429 watts. We're drawing 12.65 amps. We've got 114 volts. Okay. No. And the good news is that the wires and the bulbs are not vibrating or flexing at all. So what that tells us is that our our lamp mounting infrastructure is sufficient to withstand the wind speed and remain stable. I do have a concern about the wind speed. So hang on just a second. Now what we're going to do here is I'm going to put a reducer, and we're going to drop from a 4-inch to a 2-inch pipe. Is the hammer over there? Yeah. Okay. Now, okay, the wind speed is now over limit. Can't even tell you how fast it's going. So we've increased the pressure
Do you know what the limit is on that?
on this.
Yeah,
I'd probably say 70 miles an hour.
so it's more than 70. Makes
More
sense.
than 70. Okay, I'm going to give you some new numbers. We are now at 6.77 amps. We are pulling 700, excuse me, we just disconnected. Okay, we are at 765 watts. And again, 116 volts. Now what we've done by going to a 2-inch reducer is we've cut the output by 50%. And that has created a drop of 50% in the power being consumed to the blower. That's important because the motor could not sustain 12.5 amps. It would have overheated eventually and destroyed itself. So this is designed to support a pressurized system. And what I've done is create some pressure. At this point, I would say we have a success. We can see that aerodynamically, it's behaving as expected. That when the blower is disconnected, and this is kind of important, we're going to disconnect the blower. Now take these numbers down, Christina. $1,504 13.09 amps, 114 volts.
Wind speed.
Okay. Off scale. Yeah, off scale. Now before we put the reducer on there, how many watts we were consuming?
1,429.
1,429. So what that tells you is the device with the 10 lamps and the configuration we had it in was only reducing the wind speed or the power consumption, the output of the blower, by roughly 50 watts. So as far as obstructing the airflow, the effect here is negligible. We have to physically obstruct it with a reducer in order to limit the power or shut it down. So the design, by expanding from a 4-inch pipe to a 6-inch pipe and putting in our lamps, was a good call because it's left enough of a clear path for the air to flow through so that it really doesn't affect the output of the blower at all. The output is negligible. So you have 100% of that blower power available to drive a pressurized air system. And that's really good news.
5 minutes, Carl.
Okay, I think that'll do it for our testing tonight. That's cool.
Nice resonance effect.
Better resonance effect. Hey, this thing has some music in it. Okay. All right, so at this point, we're going to go ahead and start processing people out.